Ray the Viper. Miller's tattooed fingers tightened around Olivia's collar, pulling her face within inches of his. The stench of whiskey and cigarettes hung between them. The rusty nail bar had gone silent, a dozen leather-clad members of the Iron Viper's motorcycle gang, forming a wall of muscle and menace around them. "You think you own this town now, farm girl?" Roy growled, his voice carrying across the dead-quiet room. "Nobody says no to me, especially not some city slicker playing country." Olivia didn't flinch. Her steel-blue eyes locked onto his, unblinking, unafraid. Something in that gaze made Roy hesitate, a coldness, a calculation that didn't belong on a simple farmer's face. "Last chance," Roy snarled, his patience evaporating. "Sell that worthless farm or we burn it to the ground." "No," she said, just one word, quiet, yet firm as bedrock. Rage flashed across Roy's weathered face. His hand shot out, gripping the neckline of her simple dress. With a violent jerk, he tore the fabric down, exposing her shoulder and upper chest, intending to humiliate, to establish dominance. But the tear revealed something none of them expected. Inked into her skin over her heart was a military tattoo, not just any tattoo, but the insignia of the Special Forces. A skull with a dagger surrounded by intricate detail. Below it, the name Robert Mac Mackenzie, followed by the words, "Until Valhalla, Fallujah, 2004. The air left the room. Several of the bikers straightened, involuntarily, military training kicking in before conscious thought. The Army Widow tattoo was sacred ground, and they'd just trespassed. Roy's face drained of color. His hand fell away from her dress, as if burned. "You're Mac's widow," he whispered, his voice suddenly stripped of all bravado. Olivia reached up slowly, pulling the torn fabric back over the tattoo, her eyes never leaving Roy's. "Now," she said softly, each word precisely measured, "we're going to have a different conversation." 6 months earlier, morning light spilled over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the Virginia countryside in hues of gold and amber. The winding country road led to a property marked by an aging wooden sign, "Riverbend Farm, Estoa 1921. The 100-acre apple orchard had seen better days. Branches, unpruned fence posts leaning at tired angles, the old Chapman homestead's white paint peeling like sunburned skin. A cloud of dust announced the arrival of a vehicle, a meticulously maintained 1966 Ford Bronco, in faded navy blue, its engine rumbling with the deep, assured voice of American manufacturing from a bygone era. It pulled to a stop before the farmhouse, and, for a moment, the driver just sat there, taking in the view. Olivia Mackenzie stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. At 38, she carried herself with quiet confidence. Her chestnut hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, her face striking, rather than traditionally beautiful high cheekbones, determined jaw, and those penetrating blue eyes that seemed to assess everything they landed on. She wore a simple button-up shirt, with the sleeves rolled down despite the May heat, a habit that hadn't gone unnoticed by the locals in the 6 weeks since she'd arrived to finalize the purchase. She moved with an economy of motion, each step purposeful, her stance balanced in a way that seemed instinctive rather than practiced. "Well, Mac," she whispered to the empty air, "here it is, just like we planned." The real estate agent's car pulled in behind her, a sleek, modern sedan that looked out of place against the weathered farm backdrop. Thomas Caldwell emerged with a portfolio under his arm, his smile a touch too eager. "Mrs. Mackenzie, beautiful day to close on your dream property, isn't it?" Olivia nodded, her expression giving away nothing. "Let's get this done, Mr. Caldwell." Inside the farmhouse, dust motes danced in sunbeams that streamed through windows in need of washing. The interior was a time capsule faded wallpaper, a vintage kitchen with a cast-iron stove, hardwood floors worn smooth by generations of Chapman footsteps. "I still don't understand why you want this place," Caldwell said, spreading papers across the kitchen table. "Horizon Development offered the Chapmans twice what you're paying. They've bought up half the county already. With the new highway coming, this land will be worth a fortune." "I'm not interested in fortune," Olivia replied, signing her name with deliberate strokes. "I'm interested in peace." Caldwell looked up, something in her tone catching his attention. "Your husband, he was military, Army, Special Forces." Her pen paused momentarily. "He died in Afghanistan, 2010. "I'm sorry," Caldwell said, the rehearsed sympathy of someone who'd never worn a uniform. 13 years this August." She signed the last page. "We always talked about buying an apple orchard when he retired. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere with mountains." What she didn't tell Caldwell was how she still woke at 0400 hours every morning, reaching for a husband who wasn't there. How she'd spent over a decade moving from base to base consulting for the Department of Defense, unable to settle. How she'd chosen this particular farm in this particular valley for reasons that had nothing to do with apples or mountain views. The keys changed hands. Caldwell departed with promises to mail the final documentation, his sedan kicking up dust as he returned to civilization. And then, for the first time, Olivia was alone on her property, their property, as she still thought of it, even after all these years. She walked the perimeter of the farmhouse, slowly noting the loose boards that needed fixing, the gutters that needed cleaning. Her assessment wasn't just that of a new homeowner, but of someone cataloging defensive positions, sightlines, potential vulnerabilities, old habits. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, Olivia climbed onto the porch with a glass of bourbon maker's Mark Mac's favorite. She raised it to the darkening sky. "Mission accomplished, Captain," she said softly. "Phase 1 anyway." Dr. Franklin "Doc" Thompson first appeared in Olivia's life 3 days after she moved in, riding up her gravel driveway on a perfectly maintained 1976 Harley-Davidson Electra Glide. At 68, he cut an impressive figure, tall, lean, with a silver beard, and the ramrod posture of a man who'd never quite left the military behind. He'd served as a combat medic in Vietnam, a fact advertised by his faded veteran's cap. "Brought you a welcome basket," he announced, holding up a paper bag. "Though in these parts it's more of a welcome six-pack." But his friendly demeanor masked an analytical gaze that missed nothing from the way Olivia positioned herself at a tactical angle to the calluses on her hands that didn't come from office work. They sat on her porch drinking beer as the sunset painted the mountains. Doc filled her in on local gossip, the struggling economy, the proposed highway that had divided the community, the increasing presence of the Iron Vipers motorcycle gang in recent months. "Town's changing," Doc said, his voice heavy with regret. "Used to be you knew everyone. Now half the farms have sold to that Horizon outfit. Locals can't compete with their money." "You ever think of selling?" Olivia asked. Doc snorted. "My place has been in the family since before the Civil War. My grandson will bury me there, God willing." He studied her over his beer bottle. "Chapman Place has good bones. Needs work, though." "I've got time," Olivia replied. "And I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm a widow." Doc said not a question, but an observation. "Noticed the gold star pin on your bag? My Margaret was a military wife for 30 years. Toughest job in the service." Something passed between them, then an understanding, a recognition. Olivia realized Doc hadn't come just to be neighborly. He'd come to assess her to determine what kind of person had moved into the old Chapman place. "Special Forces?" he asked, eyes flickering to her forearms covered despite the warm evening. "My husband was. Robert Mackenzie. Afghanistan, 2010. Doc nodded a moment of silent respect. "Served with some SF boys in Nam. Good men." He took another sip. "You weren't just a military wife, though, were you?" Olivia's expression didn't change, but her posture shifted subtly. "What makes you say that? The way you move, the way you're always aware of the exits, the way you sat with your back to the wall at church last Sunday." Doc's eyes twinkled. "And the fact that you're trying to fix that John Deere tractor yourself, instead of calling Billy's repair shop like most folks would." For the first time since arriving at Riverbend, Olivia felt something loosen in her chest, the beginning of a genuine smile. "You see a lot, Doc." "Had to. Kept me alive in the jungle." He raised his bottle in a small toast. "Whatever brought you to Blue Ridge, I'm glad you're here. Town could use someone like you." As Doc prepared to leave, he paused, his expression growing serious. "Word of advice, Sheriff Colby's a good man served in Desert Storm. But be careful what you tell him. His deputy Richards drinks with the Iron Vipers." He mounted his Harley. "And watch yourself around Marshall King's people. King owns Horizon Development. Man wants every acre from here to Roanoke, and he's not particular about how he gets it." The Harley's engine roared to life. "Something about that man never sat right with me. Eyes like a snake." As Doc rode away, Olivia stood on her porch watching until the taillights disappeared around the bend. Then she went inside straight to the hidden safe in the bedroom closet. From it, she removed a file folder labeled Operation Sandstorm and a photograph of a man she'd never met but whose name she'd memorized. Marshall King, former CIA operative. The man whose file had been in her husband's final mission briefing. She spread the contents across the bed: newspaper clippings, redacted reports, handwritten notes in Mac's distinctive block letters. Her husband had been tracking something, weapons disappearing from military depots, showing up in conflict zones. "What did you find, Mac?" she whispered to the empty room. "What got you killed?" The town of Blue Ridge Grove had seen better days. Main Street featured more vacant storefronts than active businesses, their windows bearing faded "For Lease" signs. The movie theater had closed in 2008, now serving as a storage facility. Only the essentials remained: a grocery store, a hardware shop, a diner, and the rusty nail bar, which seemed to do better business than all the others combined. Olivia parked her Bronco outside the local hardware store, drawing curious glances from the old-timers gathered around a checkerboard near the entrance. Small towns had long memories and even longer lines of communication. Everyone already knew about the Army widow who'd bought the Chapman orchard. Inside, she methodically filled her cart with repair supplies: roofing, nails, wood, sealant, copper wire. The store's proprietor, a balding man in his 60s with hands stained by decades of manual labor, watched her selections with professional interest. "Roof leaking up at Riverbend?" he asked as he rang up her purchases. "In 3 places," Olivia confirmed. "Previous owners let it go too long. Chapmans were good people, but Sam's arthritis got too bad for maintenance these past few years." He glanced at her purchases again. "You planning to fix it yourself?" "That's the plan." The man, Harold, according to his name tag, studied her with newfound respect. "Not many folks do their own repairs these days. My son could help you out if you need it. Jimmy's got experience with those old farmhouse roofs." "I appreciate that. Might take you up on it when I get to the barn." "That's beyond my skills." As Harold bagged her supplies, the shop door opened, bringing with it a blast of warm air and the rumble of motorcycle engines. 3 men entered leather vests, bearing the Iron Viper's insignia, a skeletal snake coiled around a dagger. The atmosphere in the store instantly changed conversations, dropping to whispers. The lead biker, mid-40s with a shaved head and arms fully covered in tattoos, sauntered to the counter. He wore sunglasses despite being indoors, a gold tooth glinting when he smiled at Harold. "Need a carton of Marlboro's Old Man," he said, slapping cash on the counter. His gaze shifted to Olivia, traveling down her body with deliberate slowness. "Well, now you must be the new blood at Riverbend. Boys, look here. We got ourselves an actual farmer girl." Olivia continued placing her items in a bag, her movements unhurried. "Not very friendly, are you?" the biker pressed, moving closer. "Name's Deke. I'm what you might call the welcoming committee around here." "I've been welcomed, thanks." Olivia paid Harold, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Deke leaned against the counter, blocking her path slightly. "Heard you turned down Horizon's offer on that orchard. Not too smart, sweetheart. That place is falling apart." "Then I got a bargain, didn't I?" Olivia replied, her tone pleasant but firm. She moved to step around him. Deke shifted, not quite blocking her, but making it clear he could if he wanted to. "Thing is, that highway's coming through no matter what. Smart money's selling now. King's being generous, but he won't be forever." And for a moment, Olivia allowed herself to really look at him, not as an obstacle to navigate around, but as a target to assess. Her gaze was clinical, measuring distances, identifying pressure points, calculating angles. Something in that look made Deke step back involuntarily. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, picking up her bags. "Harold, thanks for your help." Outside, she loaded her supplies into the Bronco, aware of being watched through the store window. As she drove away, she noted a black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street, a man in a suit speaking into a cell phone while watching her departure. The farm didn't just need physical repairs, she realized. It needed security upgrades. Tonight, she'd begin installing the perimeter sensors she'd brought with her equipment no ordinary farmer would possess. Olivia hadn't come to Riverbend just to fulfill an old dream. She'd come to finish her husband's final mission, a mission that had somehow led back to this valley to Marshal King, and to whatever secret was worth killing for. Sheriff Jim Colby had seen his share of trouble in his 20 years wearing the badge in Blue Ridge County. At 62, with salt and pepper hair and a perpetually weary expression, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who'd faced worse in Desert Storm than anything this sleepy county could throw at him. He found Olivia in the Riverview Diner the following Tuesday, sitting alone in a booth by the window, nursing a cup of coffee while making notes in a small leather-bound journal. She'd been in town for nearly 2 months now, and while rumors swirled, Jim had made it a point to form his own impressions. "Mrs. Mackenzie," he said, removing his hat as he approached. "Mind if I join you?" Olivia closed her journal, gesturing to the seat across from her. "Sheriff?" "Just Jim is fine." He settled his bulky frame into the booth. "How's Riverbend treating you?" "Getting there. Roof doesn't leak anymore. Started clearing the north orchard yesterday. Ambitious project for one person. I like working with my hands. Helps me think." The waitress, Patty, who'd served this same diner for 30 years, appeared with a fresh pot of coffee and a knowing smile. "Your usual sheriff." "Thanks, Patty." An easy silence settled between them as Patty poured his coffee. Jim stirred in cream, taking his time before speaking again. "Your husband was military," he said finally. "Yes, Robert Mackenzie, Captain Special Forces." Jim noted the flash of surprise in her eyes. "I served with Sam Mackenzie in the Gulf, Robert's father." Understanding dawned on Olivia's face. He mentioned a Jim from his father's unit. Said you saved his dad's life outside Kuwait City. Jim shrugged, uncomfortable with the recognition. Sam would have done the same for any of us. He sipped his coffee. I was sorry to hear about Robert. Sam was a good man. I imagine his son was cut from the same cloth. He was. Olivia's gaze drifted to the window to the mountains beyond. Very much his father's son. And you? Jim asked carefully. Army intelligence, if I remember correctly. Captain Olivia Turner before you married. The diner suddenly seemed very quiet. Olivia's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened, focusing fully on Jim. You've done your homework, Sheriff. Like I said, Sam was a friend. When I heard a Mackenzie widow bought the Chapman place, I made some calls. He leaned forward slightly. Question is, why would a former intelligence officer with your qualifications bury herself in a dying town like Blue Ridge Grove? This isn't exactly retirement paradise. Olivia considered him for a long moment, weighing her response. My husband and I always planned to buy an orchard when he got out. After he died, it took me a while to follow through. 13 years is more than a while, Mrs. Mackenzie. Jim's voice remained gentle, but his eyes were shrewd. And of all the orchards in all the states, you pick 120 miles from where Marshall King just happens to be developing his new project. The name hung between them like smoke. Olivia's face remained impassive, but Jim had interviewed enough suspects to recognize contained reaction. Should that name mean something to me, Sheriff? I think it already does. Jim's breakfast arrived, eggs over easy toast bacon, but he made no move to eat. King's Horizon Development has been buying up land for the past 2 years. Man shows up out of nowhere with seemingly unlimited funding, starts reshaping the county. Now the state suddenly approves a highway project that'll cut right through here, a project that wasn't even on the planning books 3 years ago. Sounds like good business, Olivia commented neutrally. Maybe, but good businessmen don't usually need private security with military backgrounds, or connections to federal agencies that don't officially exist. Jim picked up his fork. Or have files that go dark after classified operations in the Middle East. Olivia's eyes narrowed fractionally. You've been investigating him. Let's just say I've been curious. Jim began cutting his eggs. Sam Mackenzie's daughter-in-law shows up in my county right where a man with a questionable past is consolidating power. That's the kind of coincidence that keeps me up at night. For a moment, Olivia said nothing, weighing her options. Jim Colby clearly knew more than he was letting on. The question was whether he could be trusted. What happens in your county stays in your county, she asked finally. Jim nodded once, understanding the reference to the old Vegas slogan. Long as no one's breaking laws, I'm sworn to uphold. Olivia leaned forward slightly. My husband was tracking missing weapons U.S. military hardware showing up in places it shouldn't. His last communication mentioned something called Phoenix Gate. 3 days later, I was told he died in a helicopter crash. Her voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened around her coffee cup. Except the crash site was secured by private contractors, not military personnel, and his body was cremated before I could view it. Jim's expression darkened. And you think King was involved? I think my husband discovered something someone wanted buried. King's name was in his notes. Olivia's eyes met Jim's directly. I came here for answers, Sheriff. One way or another, I'm going to get them. Jim pushed his barely touched breakfast aside. You should know the Iron Vipers moved into this county around the same time King did. They provide security services for Horizon's properties. Their leader, Roy Miller, is ex-military dishonorable discharge after allegations of war profiteering in Iraq. What happened to the allegations? Witnesses recanted, case dismissed. Jim's mouth tightened. Two of those witnesses later died in apparent accidents. The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Olivia absorbed this information, adding it to her mental file. "You're telling me this because I knew Sam Mackenzie and I owe him." Jim put his hat back on, preparing to leave. "And because I've been watching King for months, trying to figure out what he's really after. This valley's my responsibility, Mrs. Mackenzie. If something's not right, I need to know." Olivia studied him, making her decision. The Chapman place has a root cellar that doesn't appear on any of the property maps, but satellite imaging shows thermal anomalies consistent with a much larger underground structure. Jim's eyebrows rose. "You think there's something under your farm?" "I think there might be a reason King offered the Chapmans twice market value." Olivia took a business card from her pocket, wrote a number on the back, and slid it across the table. "If you want to know what I find, call this number. Only from a secure line." Jim pocketed the card, dropping cash on the table for his meal. "Watch yourself, Mrs. Mackenzie. King's people are all over this county, including some wearing badges." "I always do, Sheriff." As Jim turned to leave, she added, "And it's Olivia. Mrs. Mackenzie was my mother-in-law." Jim nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing his weathered face. "Welcome to Blue Ridge County, Olivia. For what it's worth, I think Sam would have been proud to have you as a daughter-in-law." After he left, Olivia remained at the window watching as Jim spoke briefly with a man across the street, a man she recognized from her husband's files as a former Delta operator now working private security. The man nodded toward the diner, saying something that made Jim's posture stiffen. The game was in motion. She'd made her first move by coming to Riverbend. King's surveillance of her conversation with the sheriff was the counter-move. Now she needed to accelerate her timetable before King decided she was a threat that needed elimination. The aging barn at Riverbend Farm had stood for nearly a century, weathering storms both literal and economic. Its faded red paint peeled in long strips, exposing silver-gray wood beneath. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon light that penetrated through gaps in the wooden slats. Olivia had spent the day clearing debris, organizing the previous owner's abandoned equipment, and taking measurements for repairs. Her hair was tied back, her t-shirt damp with sweat, a smudge of dirt across one cheekbone. For a moment, she looked exactly like what she claimed to be, a widow, starting over, bringing new life to an old farm. The sound of tires on gravel drew her attention. Setting down her tools, she moved to the barn door, one hand instinctively reaching toward the small of her back, where a Glock 19 rested in a concealed holster, a habit from years of operational readiness that she'd never abandoned. A battered pickup truck had pulled into the drive, its once blue paint now a patchwork of rust and primer. The man who emerged was in his mid-30s, lean and wiry with close-cropped dark hair, and the hyper-vigilant posture of someone who'd seen combat. He scanned the property in a manner civilians rarely did, assessing approaches, calculating distances, noting cover. "Can I help you?" Olivia called out, staying within the shadow of the barn doorway. The man turned, raising a hand in greeting. "Mrs. Mackenzie, I'm Lucas Reed. Doc Thompson mentioned you might need help with the orchard." Olivia studied him as he approached. His gait had the slight unevenness of someone compensating for an old injury. Though dressed in civilian clothes, worn jeans, flannel shirt, despite the heat work boots, he moved with military precision. "Did Doc mention I wasn't hiring?" she replied. Lucas stopped a respectful distance away. "He mentioned you were stubborn about doing everything yourself." A hint of a smile crossed his face. Also mentioned you're trying to resurrect a 100-year-old orchard with no commercial farming experience. And you have experience? 4 years working my uncle's apple orchard in Washington state before I enlisted. 2 tours in Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment. His eyes met hers directly. I served under Captain Mackenzie in 2009. Echo Company. Olivia's expression betrayed nothing but her grip on the concealed weapon loosened slightly. You knew my husband. Yes, ma'am. He was a good officer. Saved my life outside Kandahar. Lucas glanced toward the overgrown orchard. When Doc said his widow had bought this place, I figured helping out was the least I could do. Olivia stepped fully into the light, assessing him with new interest. Mac never mentioned a Lucas Reed. I was Specialist Reed then, just another ranger. But Captain Mackenzie... Lucas paused, choosing his words carefully. He remembered everyone's name, knew their hometowns, their families. He led from the front, always. Something in his tone rang true the quiet respect of a soldier for a commander he'd admired. Still, Olivia had survived this long by being cautious. Why are you in Blue Ridge Grove, Mr. Reed? It's a long way from Washington state. Lucas's eyes darkened momentarily. After my discharge, I needed somewhere quiet. Tried going home, but... He shrugged the gesture, conveying volumes about the struggles of reintegration that many veterans faced. Doc runs an informal support group for vets at his place. Found my way here about a year ago. And now you want to work for me. I want to help Captain Mackenzie's widow get her orchard running. Lucas gestured toward the north field. Those trees haven't been properly pruned in years. Irrigation systems shot. At minimum, you need someone who knows what they're doing before the whole crop fails. Olivia considered him weighing risk against need. She did need help with the orchard. The agricultural aspects of this cover were proving more challenging than anticipated. And having another set of eyes on the property, especially military-trained eyes, could be valuable. I can't pay much, she said finally. I'm not asking for much. Room in the caretaker's cottage, meals, fair, hourly wage for actual work. Lucas met her gaze directly. Captain Mackenzie taught us to be straightforward, ma'am. I need the work, and you need the help. Seems like a simple equation. Olivia nodded slowly. Decision made. The cottage needs cleaning. It's been empty for years. I've slept worse places. I imagine you have. She extended her hand. Trial basis, Mr. Reed. 2 weeks. Fair enough. His handshake was firm, his palm calloused from work and weapons. And it's just Lucas, ma'am. Then it's just Olivia. Ma'am makes me feel like my mother-in-law. As Lucas returned to his truck for his belongings, Olivia watched him with the calculated assessment she'd applied to potential assets throughout her intelligence career. Either Lucas Reed was exactly what he appeared to be, a veteran seeking peace and purpose, or he was an incredibly well-crafted plant. Either way, keeping him close allowed her to monitor him. And, if he proved trustworthy, having a ranger on the property might prove invaluable for what she suspected lay ahead. That night, after ensuring Lucas was settled in the caretaker's cottage across the yard, Olivia locked her doors and moved the antique dresser in the master bedroom. Behind it, a section of wallpaper concealed a wall safe that hadn't been on any of the property disclosures, a safe she'd installed herself 3 days after taking possession. The contents were sparse but significant. A satellite phone with encryption capabilities, a set of credentials identifying her as a DoD consultant, a USB drive with files her husband had sent her days before his death, and the weapon she'd carried through 2 war zones, a custom Sig Sauer P226 with her service number etched on the barrel. She removed the USB drive, inserting it into a specialized reader connected to a hardened laptop that couldn't access the internet, another security precaution born of years in intelligence work. The files were fragments her husband had managed to transmit before his death, shipping manifests, coordinates, surveillance photos, and cryptic notes that had taken her years to piece together. The final transmission had contained just 3 words: Phoenix Gate confirmed. Phoenix Gate. The operation name had appeared in classified briefings about Cold War infrastructure, a network of hardened facilities built during the height of nuclear tensions designed to survive first strikes and maintain military continuity. Most had been decommissioned after the Soviet collapse. Most, but not all. Olivia pulled up satellite imagery of Riverbend Farm and the surrounding area overlaid with thermal mapping she'd acquired through former colleagues who didn't ask too many questions. The anomalies beneath her property were consistent with a large reinforced structure too large for a simple root cellar or bomb shelter. If her suspicions were correct, the Chapman family had been farming atop a Phoenix Gate installation for decades, likely without knowledge of what lay beneath their feet. An installation that, according to Mac's final communications, had been reactivated for purposes unknown. The question was whether Marshal King knew exactly what he was buying and what he intended to do with it. A soft sound from outside interrupted her thoughts. Setting the laptop aside, Olivia moved silently to the window, staying to one side as she peered out. In the moonlight, she could make out Lucas's figure as he walked the perimeter of the property, his movements methodical, checking sight lines and approaches, just as she had done her first night here. Not the behavior of a simple farmhand, no matter his military background. Olivia watched until he returned to the cottage lights extinguishing shortly after. Then she returned to the laptop, adding a new note to her growing file. Lucas Reed, asset or threat. Background check priority. She closed the laptop and restored the room to its appearance of normalcy. Tomorrow, she would begin testing Lucas, probing his story, assessing his skills, determining whose side he was really on. If he was King's man, she'd know soon enough. And if he truly had served under her husband, then perhaps fate had sent her an ally just when she needed one most. Outside, an owl called into the Virginia night, its cry echoing across the valley that had once been peaceful farm country, a valley that now harbored secrets worth killing for. Secrets Olivia was determined to uncover, whatever the cost. Because 13 years was too long to wait for justice. Too long to wait for the truth about why a good man had died and why those responsible still walked free. In the darkness of Riverbend Farm, Olivia Mackenzie made a silent promise to her husband's memory. "I'm close, Mac. I can feel it. Whatever you found, whoever silenced you, they're going to pay." The game was in motion, and Olivia had come to win or die trying. Dawn broke over Riverbend Farm with golden fingers of light reaching across the dew-covered fields. Olivia stood on the porch, steam rising from the mug of black coffee clutched in her hands. Her morning ritual remained unchanged from her military days, up before sunrise perimeter check coffee while planning the day's operations. Only now, her mission objective wasn't counterterrorism or intelligence gathering. It was uncovering the truth that had gotten her husband killed. The door to the caretaker's cottage opened, and Lucas emerged already dressed for work, in worn jeans and a faded olive-drab t-shirt that had likely begun its life as military issue. Like Olivia, he moved with the heightened awareness of someone who had learned the hard way that threats could come from anywhere. "Morning," he called, crossing the yard with an easy stride that almost but not quite concealed his slight limp. "Been up long?" "Long enough." Olivia gestured toward the barn with her mug. "There's coffee in the kitchen if you want some before we start. I need to check something in the north field." Lucas nodded, heading toward the house, as Olivia set off across the orchard. She waited until he was inside before veering away from the north field, circling around to approach the cottage from the rear. Years of operational training had taught her to verify, then trust if at all. The cottage was sparse, a single room, with attached bathroom furnished with the basics. Lucas had few possessions, a duffel bag containing clothes, a worn copy of Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls, a framed photograph of what appeared to be a ranger unit in Afghanistan, and a metal lockbox secured with a combination padlock. Olivia checked the obvious hiding places under the mattress, behind the small dresser, taped to the underside of drawers. Nothing. Either Lucas was clean or experienced enough to know better. She was about to leave when her eye caught a small anomaly in the floorboards near the bed. Kneeling, she pressed lightly on the board. It gave, slightly revealing, a shallow space beneath. Inside lay a satellite phone similar to her own, a folded document with FBI letterhead just visible at the top, and a Sig Sauer P320 with suppressor attachment. Not the equipment of a simple farmhand, even one with ranger training. Carefully replacing everything exactly as she'd found it, Olivia slipped out the back way and circled around to approach the north field from the expected direction. By the time Lucas emerged from the main house with his own coffee, she was examining apple trees as if she'd been there all along. "These trees need serious pruning," she called as he approached. "Some haven't been maintained in years." Lucas joined her eyes, tracking professionally over the orchard. "Old growth, but salvageable. You're lucky another year of neglect, and you'd be starting from scratch." They worked through the morning, Lucas demonstrating genuine knowledge of orchard maintenance as they pruned diseased branches and cleared undergrowth. He moved with practiced efficiency, occasionally dropping references to his uncle's orchard in Washington state, building the backstory he'd presented. Around noon, Doc Thompson's Harley rumbled up the drive. The old medic dismounted with the stiffness of a man whose body remembered too many decades of hard use, but whose spirit refused to acknowledge the limitations of age. "Thought I'd check how the rehabilitation project is going," he called, ambling toward them with a paper bag in hand. "Brought sandwiches from Mary's Diner." They settled in the shade of a large oak tree, unwrapping thick sandwiches stuffed with roast beef and sharp cheddar, simple food with the hearty flavors that had sustained generations of American farmers. "Lucas working out?" Doc asked, glancing between them with shrewd eyes that missed little. "Knows his apples," Olivia conceded. "Jury's still out on everything else." Lucas took the assessment with good humor. "High praise coming from you," Bakite chuckled, unwrapping his sandwich. "Town's buzzing about you standing up to Deke at the hardware store. Iron Vipers aren't used to being refused." "They'll have to adapt," Olivia replied, her tone making it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. Doc nodded, changing tack. "Came by for another reason, actually. Been meaning to tell you about these old properties around here. History most folks have forgotten." He took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "This valley has secrets." Olivia's attention sharpened. "What kind of secrets?" During the Civil War, this area was strategically important, controlled access to the valley. Later, during Prohibition, these hills were full of moonshine operations. Doc gestured toward the distant ridgeline. "But the real interesting stuff started during the Cold War." Lucas looked up from his sandwich, expression carefully neutral. "What happened then? Government built things, underground things." Doc's voice dropped slightly, though there was no one else to hear. "Fallout shelters, communication bunkers, storage facilities. Most people around here either don't know or pretend not to notice. Construction crews would come in, work for months, then disappear. Land would be sold back to private owners who were paid well not to ask questions." "You think there's something like that here at Riverbend?" Olivia asked, maintaining a facade of skepticism while her pulse quickened. "I know there is," Doc replied flatly. My father was county doctor before me. Back in '62, right after the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was approached by men in suits, asked him to sign papers, told him he might be called to provide medical services at a special facility if things went sideways with the Russians. The old medic's eyes drifted toward the farmhouse. Chapmans were paid 3 times market value for mineral rights that were never exercised. Never once questioned why their land taxes were so low either. Lucas and Olivia exchanged a glance, a silent communication between professionals recognizing the significance of what they were hearing. "You're saying there's a government bunker under my farm," Olivia stated. "I'm saying there was. What's there now?" Doc shrugged. "Nobody from any official agency has been seen around here in decades. Until recently, that is." "Recently," Lucas prompted. "About 2 years ago, right before King showed up with his Horizon development plans. Men in work clothes claiming to be from the utility company, spending a lot of time on properties that would later be bought by King." Doc's weathered face creased in a frown. "No logos on their trucks. No work orders filed with the county." Olivia absorbed this information, pieces clicking into place. And now King wants Riverbend. Offered the Chapmans twice market value. When Sam refused, things started happening. Equipment failures, livestock getting sick. Then Sam had his accident on the tractor. Doc's expression hardened. Sheriff ruled it an accident, but Sam had been driving tractors for 50 years without a scratch. The implications hung heavy in the air. Lucas's posture had subtly shifted, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. After Sam's accident, Mrs. Chapman couldn't manage alone. Their children had moved away years ago. King came back with his offer, and this time she accepted. Doc finished his sandwich, crumpling the wrapper. "You showing up to outbid Horizon was the first setback King's had in this county." "No wonder the welcome committee paid me a visit," Olivia murmured. "It'll get worse," Doc warned. "King doesn't take no for an answer, and he's got the Iron Vipers to make sure people hear him clearly." As Doc prepared to leave, he paused, studying Lucas with newfound intensity. "You look familiar, son. We met before." "Don't think so, sir," Lucas replied smoothly.
Only been in town about a year.
Doc nodded slowly, unconvinced. "If you say so." He mounted his Harley, then turned back to Olivia. "Almost forgot town meeting tomorrow night at the community center. Horizon's presenting their final highway plans. Might be worth attending." After Doc's departure, Olivia and Lucas returned to work, but the easy rhythm of the morning had evaporated. Each was reassessing the other, calculating risks, measuring how much to reveal. "Your friend knows more than he's saying," Lucas finally commented, voice casual as he pruned a branch. "So do you," Olivia countered, meeting his gaze directly. "Former Rangers don't usually carry FBI credentials and encrypted sat phones." Lucas froze momentarily, then continued pruning. His voice, when it came, was quieter but firm. "And former intelligence officers don't buy remote farms without a reason." He set down his shears, turning to face her fully. "We should talk." "Yes," Olivia agreed, making her decision. "We should." The old root cellar beneath the farmhouse had been converted into a makeshift command center. A generator hummed softly, powering surveillance monitors that displayed feeds from cameras Olivia had strategically placed around the property. A topographical map of the area covered one wall, with Riverbend Farm at its center and the surrounding properties marked with colored pins. Lucas examined the setup with professional appreciation. "How long did this take you to install?" 3 weeks. Olivia activated a secured laptop. "I had equipment shipped in construction material deliveries, less conspicuous that way." "Thorough." Lucas studied the map. "The pins, Blue are properties already purchased by Horizon. Red are holdouts. Yellow mark, where Doc mentioned unusual utility activity. She indicated a pattern that formed a rough circle with Riverbend at its center. Notice anything? Lucas leaned closer. They're creating a perimeter, controlling access to something central. His finger traced the pattern. Classic security setup for a high-value installation. My thoughts exactly. Olivia pulled up thermal imaging on the laptop. This is what's under Riverbend Farm. Too large and deep for a typical root cellar or fallout shelter. The imaging showed an extensive structure beneath the property corridors, chambers what appeared to be an elevator shaft leading to a depth of at least 3 stories underground. Lucas whistled softly. Phoenix Gate. Olivia's head snapped up. What did you say? Phoenix Gate. Cold War continuity of government site. Lucas met her startled gaze. That's what you're looking for, isn't it? What your husband found. For a long moment, Olivia said nothing, reassessing the man before her. Then she reached a decision. Who do you really work for, Lucas? He straightened, dropping the farmhand persona like a discarded coat. FBI counterintelligence. I've been investigating Marshall King for 14 months. Show me. Lucas retrieved his credentials from inside his boot, not the ones she'd found earlier, but a second set hidden elsewhere. The badge and ID were genuine. Olivia had seen enough fakes to know the difference. Special Agent Lucas Reed, he confirmed. I was placed here to monitor King's activities and identify his network. When you arrived and started asking questions about Horizon development, my superiors wanted to know why. So Doc sending you here was arranged. Doc's been helping us track unusual activity in the area. He's well connected with the veteran community. Here's things. Lucas replaced his credentials. Your arrival complicated my operation, Mrs. Mackenzie, or should I say Captain Turner. Olivia's expression remained neutral, but her mind raced, calculating the implications. If Lucas was telling the truth, he could be a valuable ally. If he was lying, did you really serve under my husband? Yes. Everything I told you about Captain Mackenzie was true. I didn't know the connection until you arrived and Doc mentioned your name. Lucas's expression softened slightly. He was a good officer. One of the best. Olivia studied him, looking for tells of deception and finding none. What do you know about Phoenix Gate? It was a Cold War program, hardened facilities built to ensure military and governmental continuity in case of nuclear attack. Most were decommissioned in the 90s after the Soviet collapse. Lucas gestured to the thermal imaging. But some remained operational in modified capacities, particularly those with strategic value. And this one under my farm. According to my sources, it was officially decommissioned in 1995. All equipment removed, access sealed. Lucas frowned at the imaging. But these readings suggest otherwise. The thermal signature indicates active power systems ventilation. Someone reactivated it, Olivia concluded, or never deactivated it in the first place. Exactly. And Marshall King is very interested in acquiring properties with Phoenix Gate installations beneath them. He's purchased 3 similar sites across the country in the past 5 years. Olivia's mind connected dots she'd been assembling for years. My husband's last mission involved tracking missing weapons specialized equipment disappearing from military depots. His final message mentioned Phoenix Gate being confirmed. She looked up at Lucas. If King is using these old installations to store and move illegal weapons, it would explain a lot, Lucas agreed. The old bunkers were designed to be invisible off the grid, self-sustaining, with access points disguised as ordinary structures like barns or silos, perfect for moving contraband without detection. Olivia turned back to the map. The question is how to prove it, and how to find the access point here at Riverbend. Lucas studied the thermal imaging again. These old Phoenix facilities typically had multiple entry points for security reasons. Main access would be disguised as something ordinary. Like a root cellar, Olivia interjected. Exactly. But there would be emergency exits, service tunnels. Lucas traced the imaging with his finger. This line here could be a tunnel leading toward the north field. And this, he pointed to a rectangular structure. This could be a vertical access shaft, possibly disguised as a well or pump house. Olivia considered this mind working through tactical approaches. We need to find a way in without alerting King that we're looking. Tomorrow night, Lucas suggested. During the town meeting, King and his security detail will be there presenting the highway plans. It's our best opportunity to search unobserved. Olivia nodded slowly. Decision made. Tomorrow night, then. But Lucas, she fixed him with a penetrating stare. If you're playing me, if this is some kind of setup, you should know I'm not someone you want as an enemy. Lucas held her gaze without flinching. Captain Mackenzie said something similar to me once, right before a night op in Kandahar. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He was right then. I suspect you are now. The tension between them eased fractionally, not trust, not yet, but the wary respect of professionals recognizing each other's capabilities. I'll need to verify your identity, Olivia stated. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Lucas nodded toward her equipment. Your DoD contacts should be able to confirm my status. Just be careful who you ask. We don't know how high King's connections reach. As Lucas departed to continue their cover work in the orchard, Olivia remained in the makeshift command center studying the thermal imaging of what lay beneath her property. After 13 years of searching for answers, she might finally be close to the truth about her husband's death. And if Marshal King was responsible, she would make sure justice was served one way or another. The Blue Ridge Community Center had seen better days. Paint peeled from its wooden siding, and the fluorescent lights inside flickered intermittently, casting uneven illumination over the assembled townspeople. Despite these shortcomings, the building was filled to capacity, every folding chair occupied with latecomers standing along the walls. Olivia sat beside Doc Thompson in the third row, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. Sheriff Colby stood near the back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Town council members occupied a folding table at the front, their nervous glances toward the sleek presentation setup revealing who truly controlled the meeting. Marshal King moved with the confident ease of a man accustomed to power. In his mid-50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and a tailored suit that cost more than most locals earned in months, he projected affluence and authority. His security detail, former military by their bearing, positioned themselves strategically around the room. "Quite the turnout," Doc murmured, nodding toward the crowd. "People are worried. This highway will change everything." "That's the idea," Olivia replied softly, her attention fixed on King. In person, he matched the photographs from her husband's files, the same cold eyes, the same practiced smile that never quite reached them. King stepped to the podium, surveying the room with the calculated charm of a practiced public speaker. "Good evening, friends and neighbors. It's wonderful to see such community engagement." And for the next 20 minutes, he outlined Horizon Development's vision for Blue Ridge County, the highway bringing economic opportunities, the planned business park, creating jobs, the inevitable progress that would revitalize a struggling rural community. His presentation was polished, peppered with statistics and colorful projections of future prosperity. Change can be frightening. King acknowledged, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that forced the audience to lean in. But progress is inevitable. The question isn't whether change will come to Blue Ridge, it's whether you'll benefit from it or be left behind. From her seat, Olivia studied the man who might have ordered her husband's death. Nothing in his smooth delivery betrayed a man capable of such actions, but she'd encountered enough wolves in sheep's clothing to recognize the predatory calculation behind his affable facade. As King concluded his presentation and opened the floor for questions, tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface began to emerge. Local farmers voiced concerns about water rights and property access. Business owners worried about being bypassed by the new highway. Each question was met with rehearsed reassurances that somehow never addressed the core concerns. When Harold from the hardware store stood to ask about compensation for businesses that would lose frontage, one of King's associates whispered something to a leather-jacketed man at the back of the room. Moments later, 3 members of the Iron Vipers motorcycle gang entered, positioning themselves against the wall, a silent reminder of the consequences of opposition. Doc nudged Olivia, nodding toward the new arrivals. Subtle, aren't they? Olivia recognized the lead biker as Deke from their encounter at the hardware store. He caught her looking and smirked, making a show of scanning her from head to toe. As the questions continued, King maintained his composure, deflecting concerns with practiced ease. Then Olivia stood, waiting to be acknowledged. King's expression flickered momentarily, a micro-expression of annoyance quickly masked with a politician's smile. Yes, the new owner of Riverbend Farm. Mrs. Mackenzie, isn't it? It is. Olivia's voice carried clearly through the room. I've been reviewing the environmental impact statements for the proposed highway. Specifically, the section detailing groundwater assessment and subsurface surveys. King's smile remained fixed, but something hardened in his eyes. I'm afraid those technical documents are quite complex. I'm specifically interested in why the survey teams avoided Riverbend Farm and the surrounding properties, Olivia continued, undeterred. Standard protocol for a project of this scale would require comprehensive subsurface assessment of all affected areas, yet your surveys have a curious gap precisely where historical records indicate extensive underground infrastructure might exist. A murmur rippled through the crowd. King's security details straightened suddenly, more attentive. I'm not sure what historical records you're referring to, Mrs. Mackenzie, King replied, voice cooling. But I assure you, our environmental assessments followed all required protocols. Then you won't mind providing the complete geological surveys for public review, Olivia pressed, including ground-penetrating radar results and subsurface anomaly reports. King's mask slipped momentarily, a flash of cold calculation crossing his features before the affable businessman returned. Of course, all documentation is available through proper channels. Perhaps after the meeting, my team can help you navigate the request process. Before Olivia could respond, an elderly man rose shakily to his feet, several rows back. Walter Gaines, who had served as the town's postmaster for 40 years before retirement. I remember the government work in the 60s, Walter declared, his voice quavering but determined. My father's farm was next to Chapman Land, teams working at night, trucks coming and going. They paid us not to ask questions. He fixed King with a rheumy gaze. Lady's right. There's something under those farms that ain't on no map. The room erupted in overlapping conversations. King attempted to regain control, but the composed meeting had devolved into clusters of animated discussion. Sheriff Colby pushed away from the wall, moving to stand near Walter protectively as Deke and his fellow bikers eyed the old man with obvious displeasure. Meeting adjourned for tonight, the mayor announced, pounding a gavel ineffectually. We'll reconvene when we have answers to these new concerns. As the crowd dispersed, Doc leaned close to Olivia. You stirred the hornet's nest. King won't let this go unanswered. I'm counting on it, Olivia replied quietly. The more pressure he feels, the more likely he is to make a mistake. They exited into the cool evening air, where Lucas waited beside Olivia's Bronco, maintaining their cover as employer and worker. His expression revealed nothing, but his eyes communicated a clear message: be careful. As Olivia drove back to Riverbend with Lucas, the headlights of a black SUV appeared in her rearview mirror, maintaining a consistent distance behind them. We have a tail, she noted calmly. Lucas checked the side mirror. King's security. They're not trying to be subtle about it. Good. Let them watch. It'll keep their attention while we do what we need to do. The SUV followed them all the way to Riverbend's gate, before pulling to the side of the road, engine running, headlights illuminating the entrance to her property, a clear message that they were being monitored. Olivia parked near the farmhouse, she and Lucas maintaining their cover by discussing orchard work as they exited the vehicle. Only when they were inside, lights on, to suggest normal evening activities, did they drop the pretense. King was rattled, Lucas observed, drawing the curtains to block outside observation. He wasn't expecting anyone to publicly question the surveys. Walter's intervention was unexpected, Olivia replied, moving through the house to shut off lights in a pattern suggesting she was preparing for bed. But useful. It confirmed there's local knowledge about whatever is beneath Riverbend. It also painted a target on Walter's back, Lucas cautioned. And yours. Olivia checked her watch. Our watchers will expect the lights to go out within the hour. Once the house is dark, we move. The North Field Equipment shed should contain the access point based on the thermal imaging. Lucas nodded, checking the compact 9mm pistol holstered at his ankle. If we find evidence linking King to illegal weapons, I'll need to call it in. Bureau will want to move quickly. Understood. But if we find evidence linking him to my husband's death, Olivia's expression hardened. That's mine. Lucas studied her, recognizing the dangerous edge in her voice. Justice, not vengeance, Captain. That's what your husband would want. Their eyes met in silent communication, the understanding between professionals who had seen enough combat to know the cost of crossing certain lines. Finally, Olivia nodded once, acknowledging the wisdom in his words, if not fully committing to them. 1 hour, she said. Then we find out what King is willing to kill for. The night wrapped around Riverbend Farm like a shroud, clouds obscuring the moon and stars. A perfect darkness for covert operations, Olivia thought, as she and Lucas moved silently across the property, avoiding the likely observation angles from the road where King's security detail remained parked. They wore dark clothing, carried minimal equipment, flashlights with red filters to preserve night vision, compact tools for bypassing potential security measures, sidearms for protection. Years of operational experience guided their movements, staying low, using terrain features for concealment, communicating with hand signals rather than words. The equipment shed stood silhouetted against the night sky, a simple structure that had been there since the farm's establishment in the 1920s. According to Doc, it had been rebuilt in the early 1960s, coinciding with the Cold War construction he'd described. Lucas took position at the corner of the building, covering Olivia as she examined the padlocked door. The lock was new, not weathered like it should have been if it had been there for years. She bypassed it with practiced efficiency, easing the door open to reveal a cluttered interior filled with old farm equipment and supplies. Using her red-filtered flashlight, Olivia methodically examined the dirt floor while Lucas secured the entrance. In the far corner, partially hidden by stacked crates, she found what they were seeking: a section of flooring that didn't match the rest, its dimensions too precise to be natural. Here, she whispered, kneeling to examine the edges. Recent disturbance in the dirt. Someone's used this within the last few months. Together, they cleared the crates, revealing a trapdoor with a recessed handle. No lock secured it, a calculated risk by whoever used it, betting that the padlocked shed and hidden location provided sufficient security. Olivia met Lucas's gaze, receiving a nod of confirmation before she gripped the handle and pulled. The door lifted smoothly, revealing a metal staircase descending into darkness. Cool, dry air wafted up from below, air moved by ventilation systems, not the musty stillness of an abandoned structure. Lucas went first, weapon ready, moving with the careful precision of a man trained for close-quarters combat. Olivia followed, pulling the trapdoor closed above them to conceal their presence. The staircase led to a short corridor that ended at a heavy blast door, the unmistakable design of Cold War military architecture. The door stood partially open, another indication that the facility was in active use. Beyond it lay a network of corridors and chambers illuminated by emergency lighting, the dim blue-tinged illumination used in secure facilities to maintain operational readiness without broadcasting presence. "Phoenix Gate," Lucas murmured, confirming what they both recognized. "Officially decommissioned, unofficially repurposed." They moved through the facility with practiced caution, documenting their findings with small camera devices. The bunker extended far beyond what the thermal imaging had suggested, 3 levels of reinforced chambers connected by staircases and a central elevator shaft. Most rooms stood empty, stripped of their original Cold War equipment, but some contained modern additions: communication arrays, computer terminals, environmental control systems. On the lowest level, they found what they were looking for. A large chamber had been converted into a storage facility with metal shipping containers arranged in neat rows. Each bore military shipping codes, but with subtle discrepancies that would be apparent only to those familiar with legitimate military logistics. "Weapons," Lucas confirmed, examining the manifest attached to the nearest container. "Artillery components, guidance systems, specialized ammunition." He photographed the documents methodically. "Diverted from military supply chains, repackaged for private sale." Olivia moved deeper into the chamber, searching for anything connected to her husband. At the far end, a secure room had been converted into an office space. The door was locked with an electronic keypad, a modern addition to the Cold War infrastructure. While Lucas continued documenting the weapons cache, Olivia examined the keypad. Years of intelligence work had taught her to recognize patterns in security measures. The wear on specific keys suggested frequent use, narrowing the possible combinations. Within minutes, she had bypassed the security, gaining access to what appeared to be King's private operations center. Inside, computer monitors displayed security feeds from throughout the facility, confirming her suspicion that their presence would soon be detected if it hadn't been already. Working quickly, she searched the desk, photographing documents, examining files. A locked cabinet yielded to her picks, revealing folders organized by operation name. She rifled through them rapidly until a designation caught her eye. Operation Sandstorm, the same operation her husband had referenced in his final communications. Heart racing, Olivia removed the folder, spreading its contents across the desk. Operation dates, personnel assignments, target locations in Afghanistan and Iraq, and a list of resources that matched the missing weapons her husband had been tracking. Among the documents was a personnel file with her husband's photograph paperclipped to it. Captain Robert Mac Mackenzie listed as a security liability, with a final notation that chilled her blood: "Issue resolved, Fallujah intercept successful." Proof. After 13 years, irrefutable proof that her husband's death had been no accident but a deliberate elimination of a threat to King's operation. "Olivia!" Lucas's voice from the doorway pulled her attention back to their immediate situation. His expression was grim. "We've got movement. Security systems just activated on the upper level. Someone's coming." She photographed the remaining documents rapidly, then hesitated over her husband's file, the evidence she'd sought for so long. Decision made, she folded it and tucked it inside her jacket. "Time to go," she said, voice steady, despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. "Did you get what you need?" Lucas nodded, holding up his camera. "Enough to bring in the Bureau. Multiple federal violations, international arms trafficking, probable treason." They moved swiftly back through the weapons storage area, heading for a secondary exit route they'd identified during their exploration. As they reached a junction of corridors, voices echoed from ahead, men descending from the upper levels. "This way," Lucas directed, pulling Olivia toward a utility passage. They navigated the narrow corridor, emerging into what had once been an emergency evacuation route. A ladder led upward to what should be an exit disguised on the surface. Lucas went up first, pushing against the hatch at the top. "It's secured from above," he reported, applying more pressure. "Heavy, but not locked. Give me a moment." As he worked to open the exit, Olivia heard a sound that froze her blood, the distinctive mechanical click of a weapon being readied behind them. She turned slowly, hand moving toward her own sidearm. Roy Miller stood at the corridor entrance, flanked by two Iron Viper's members. His expression was almost apologetic as he aimed a pistol at Olivia's chest. "Captain Turner," he said, using her maiden name and military rank. "Or Mackenzie now, I guess. Been wondering when you'd show up." Olivia's mind raced, calculating angles, distances, probabilities. "You know who I am. Known since you bought Riverbend. King's been expecting you for years." Roy gestured with his weapon. "Step away from the ladder, both of you. Hands where I can see them." Above them, Lucas had frozen at the sound of Roy's voice. His eyes met Olivia's in silent communication, a tactical assessment passing between them in an instant. "How'd you know my husband?" Olivia asked deliberately, drawing Roy's attention to her as Lucas silently prepared to move. Something shifted in Roy's expression, a flicker of what might have been regret. "Fallujah, 2004. I was private security, then mercenary, if we're being honest. Your husband was tracking weapons that disappeared from a forward operating base." He kept the gun steady, but his voice softened. "Mac was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened to him." "You were there," Olivia realized, a cold certainty settling in her chest. "When they killed him." Roy's jaw tightened. "I didn't pull the trigger, but yeah, I was there." His gaze hardened again, professional detachment returning. "King's on his way down. He'll want to handle this personally." "And then what?" Olivia challenged, taking a calculated half-step forward. "You disappear us, like you disappeared my husband. 2 more accidents to cover up King's operation." Roy's aim didn't waver, but something in his eyes did, a flicker of conscience not yet completely extinguished. "Nobody said anything about accidents. King just wants to talk." "Like he talked to Mac," Olivia pressed, taking another small step. Behind her, she could feel Lucas tensing, ready to move. "Like he talked to Sam Chapman after he refused to sell Riverbend." The two bikers flanking Roy shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. These were local muscle, Olivia realized, hired thugs who might be willing to intimidate farmers, but weren't prepared for the darker aspects of King's operation. "Sam Chapman was an accident," one of them muttered. "That wasn't supposed to happen." "Nothing's ever supposed to happen," Olivia replied, her voice taking on the commanding tone that had once directed special operations teams in combat zones. "But men like King leave bodies behind them. First my husband, then Sam Chapman. Who's next? Walter Gaines for speaking up at the meeting, Doc Thompson for asking too many questions." Roy's expression remained stoic, but his companions looked increasingly uncertain. Olivia pressed her advantage, speaking directly to them now. "You wear those Viper patches like they mean something." like they represent some kind of brotherhood. Her voice carried contempt and challenge. My husband believed in brotherhood too, in never leaving a man behind, in standing for something greater than himself. The moment stretched, tension building like a thundercloud. Then Roy made his decision. He lowered his weapon slightly, not dropping his guard, but signaling a willingness to negotiate. You've got 5 minutes to clear out. Then I call it in. His eyes bored into Olivia's. This doesn't make us even. Not by a long shot. But Mac deserved better than he got. Lucas had the exit hatch open now, the night sky visible beyond. He reached down, offering a hand to Olivia. We need to move. Now. As Olivia reached for Lucas's hand, the distant sound of an elevator activating echoed through the corridor. King was on his way down. Roy tensed, glancing back over his shoulder. Go, he ordered, voice urgent now. King has the place wired explosives set as a fail-safe. If he thinks the operation is compromised, he'll bring the whole thing down. Olivia hesitated, looking at the man who had been present when her husband died. This isn't over, Roy. No, he agreed grimly. But next time we meet, there won't be any walking away. Not for either of us. Lucas pulled Olivia up through the hatch, and they emerged into the night air beside the old well house, another of the farm's seemingly innocent structures that concealed Phoenix Gate access points. They moved swiftly across the darkened property, keeping to shadows racing against the inevitable moment when King would discover their infiltration. They reached the farmhouse just as lights began coming on in the distance, vehicles arriving at the main entrance to Riverbend. King's full security detail responding to the breach. We need to go, Lucas urged, already moving toward his truck parked behind the barn. Bureau safe house in Roanoke. I'll call in the tactical team once we're clear. But Olivia stood motionless, watching as more vehicles approached her farm, her home, the dream she had shared with Mac, now a battlefield in a war that had claimed him 13 years ago. No, she said, decision crystallizing within her. Running gives King time to clean up, destroy evidence, move his operation elsewhere. Her eyes met Lucas's steel beneath the surface. I didn't come this far to retreat. Lucas recognized the determination in her stance, the same unyielding resolve he'd seen in her husband before high-risk operations. What's your play? King wants Riverbend. Wants me out of the way. Olivia's expression hardened into tactical calculation. So let's let him think he's winning. Draw him in where we control the ground. Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. You're setting a trap. I'm finishing what my husband started. Olivia checked her weapon mind, already plotting tactical positions. Call your people, but tell them to hold position until we give the signal. King needs to believe he's in control until it's too late for him to run. Lucas hesitated, FBI protocol warring with battlefield pragmatism. Finally, he nodded. You're show captain. What do you need me to do? Get to Doc Thompson. Tell him to activate his network, those veterans he mentioned. We'll need eyes around the perimeter and backup routes secured. Olivia's gaze swept the property, assessing defensible positions. Then get to Sheriff Colby. If he's the man my father-in-law believed him to be, we'll need him on board. As Lucas prepared to depart, Olivia caught his arm. King will come in force. Once this starts, there's no standing down. I know. Lucas's expression was solemn. Your husband saved my life in Afghanistan. Least I can do is help bring justice for his death. After Lucas disappeared into the night, Olivia entered the farmhouse one last time. In the bedroom, she opened the hidden safe and removed her husband's dog tags, slipping them around her neck. Then she stripped off her civilian clothes, revealing the tattoo over her heart, the Special Forces insignia with Robert's name and Until Valhalla, Fallujah 2004, inked into her skin. A promise, a memorial, a battle standard. From the safe, she retrieved tactical gear she'd hoped never to wear again, a reminder of the woman she'd been before loss had sent her into hiding. Captain Olivia Turner back in the field for one final mission. Outside vehicles approached the farmhouse headlights, cutting through the darkness. King's men coming to eliminate the threat she posed. They thought they were hunting a widow. They were about to discover they were facing a warrior. And this time, she wasn't fighting for country or mission. She was fighting for the only thing that had ever truly mattered: justice for the man whose name was etched above her heart and into her very soul. Night descended on Riverbend Farm, bringing with it a darkness that concealed both predator and prey. Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then steadier, drumming against the farmhouse roof and shrouding the property in a silver curtain of precipitation. Perfect weather for what was to come. In the distance, a convoy of vehicles approached headlights, cutting through the rain tires, churning mud on the long driveway leading to the farmhouse. Marshal King had arrived with his security detail, coming to eliminate the threat to his operation once and for all. Inside the darkened farmhouse, Olivia Mackenzie, or Captain Olivia Turner, as she had been known in her former life, moved with calm precision, the weight of her tactical gear a familiar comfort after years of civilian disguise. Her husband's dog tags hung around her neck, cool metal against her skin. Above her heart, beneath her combat shirt, the memorial tattoo served as a constant reminder of why she fought. Tonight would end a 13-year quest for justice, one way or another. From the second-floor window, she watched the vehicles deploy in a standard security perimeter, King's men taking positions around the house with practiced efficiency. Former military, most of them now selling their skills to the highest bidder without concern for legality or morality. 8 men total plus King himself, who remained in the lead SUV, content to let his mercenaries clear the path. Olivia's phone vibrated with a text from Lucas Doc's network activated. Sheriff standing by with County Tactical Unit. FBI en route, 30 men out. She texted back, hold positions until signal. King must fully commit. The rain increased in intensity, reducing visibility and masking sounds, tactical advantages for the defenders. Olivia moved silently through the house, a ghost in her own home, monitoring the approaching threat through carefully positioned surveillance cameras. King's voice crackled over handheld radios carried by his men. Secure the target. I want her alive if possible. Find whatever evidence she took from the facility. Hubris. King assumed she would be unprepared, vulnerable. He couldn't conceive that a mere farmer's widow might be his equal in strategic thinking, a fatal underestimation. The first team approached the front porch, weapons ready, moving with the coordinated precision of men who had done this before. They breached the door with practiced efficiency, clearing rooms with tactical sweeps straight from military handbooks. But the house was empty of human presence. Only strategically positioned tablets displaying looped security footage from throughout the property, footage showing King's men entering the underground facility, handling illegal weapons, discussing operations that violated multiple federal laws. Each incriminating moment captured, transmitted to secure servers, and now playing on endless repeat for the intruders to discover. The mercenary leader grabbed one of the tablets, face darkening, as he realized what he was seeing. "Sir," he spoke into his radio, "the house is rigged with evidence broadcasts. She knew we were coming." King's voice hissed through the radio, tight with controlled rage. "Find her! Now!" The team regrouped, redirecting their search toward the barn and outbuildings. As they moved across the open yard, Olivia watched from her hidden position in the modified silo, one of the original access points to the Phoenix Gate facility, repurposed as her command center for the night's operation. Through her tactical scope, she could see King in his vehicle phone pressed to his ear, face illuminated by the dashboard lights. Making calls, activating contingencies, preparing his escape if necessary. A survivor, not a fighter, someone who let others take the risks while he remained in safety. Unlike her husband, who had always led from the front. Unlike Olivia herself, who had never asked her operatives to take risks, she wouldn't face herself. Her radio crackled softly. "Perimeter teams in position," came Doc's voice, gruff with tension but steady. "My boys have eyes on all approach routes. Nothing gets in or out without us knowing." Doc's boys. A network of veterans stretching back to Vietnam, men who understood duty and brotherhood, who had rallied to his call without question. Positioned now in the surrounding woods and fields, invisible in the rain and darkness, they formed a secondary perimeter beyond King's awareness. Sheriff's units staged on county roads. Lucas reported next, his voice calm and professional. "FBI tactical 10 minutes out. Ready to move on your signal." Olivia checked her weapon one last time, mind clear and focused, as it hadn't been in 13 years. "Hold positions," she ordered. "King hasn't shown his full hand yet." As if in response to her assessment, a new development unfolded below. The Iron Viper's motorcycle gang arrived, a dozen riders materializing out of the rainy darkness, cutting their engines at the property edge to approach stealthily. Among them, Roy Miller moved with the confident authority of their leader, conferring briefly with King's security chief. Through enhanced audio surveillance, Olivia caught fragments of their conversation. "Check the old well house and Northfield shed. Knew about the facility somehow. King wants her alive if possible." The gang split into teams, moving to search the outbuildings. Roy headed toward the north field with 3 men directly toward one of the Phoenix Gate access points, toward where Olivia had planted the most damning evidence against King. Perfect. She activated the tactical frequency used by Doc's veterans. "Team Bravo, illuminate target vehicles in 60 seconds. Team Charlie, stand by at Northfield access point." Switching to Lucas's channel, "Be ready to move on my signal. King needs to believe he's lost everything before we reveal our hand." Precisely 60 seconds later, powerful spotlights concealed in the surrounding trees activated simultaneously, bathing King's vehicles in harsh white light that destroyed the night vision of his security team. Disoriented shouts filled the air as the mercenaries whirled toward this unexpected threat, weapons raised against enemies they couldn't locate. King's driver gunned the SUV's engine, attempting to reverse out of the trap, only to find the driveway blocked by a fallen tree that hadn't been there minutes earlier. Doc's handiwork, no doubt. Olivia moved, then exiting the silo through a concealed rear door, using the confusion to advance toward the north field, where Roy and his men were converging on the shed, hiding the Phoenix Gate access point. Through her tactical earpiece, she monitored the chaotic radio traffic as King's ordered perimeter collapsed into disarray. The rain continued to fall, soaking through clothing, reducing visibility, turning the ground treacherous. Olivia used the conditions to her advantage, moving like a shadow between pools of darkness. Her steps sure on ground she had memorized over months of preparation. She reached the equipment shed moments after Roy and his team entered, positioning herself beside the door, listening to their movements inside. Through a gap in the weathered boards, she could see them discovering the trap door, conferring in low voices. "King wants anything she might have taken," one of the bikers said, yanking the trap door open. "Let's check below." "You 3 go ahead," Roy replied, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command. "I'll secure the perimeter." As the three bikers descended through the trapdoor, Olivia silently counted seconds. 3, 2, 1. A muffled thud echoed up from below, followed by coughing and confused shouts. The non-lethal gas canisters she had rigged to the entryway had deployed perfectly, incapacitating the intruders without killing them, leaving them alive to testify against King when this was over. Roy tensed at the sounds of distress, drawing his weapon as he moved toward the trapdoor. Stevens-Daniels, report. Olivia stepped into the doorway, her own weapon leveled at Roy's back. They can't hear you. Roy froze, then slowly raised his hands, not turning around. Figured it might be you, he said, voice revealing no surprise. Smart setup, using King's own facility against him. Drop the weapon, Roy. Olivia's voice was cold professional, the voice of Captain Turner, not the widow Mackenzie. Slowly, Roy complied, his pistol clattering to the dirt floor. Only then did he turn to face her eyes, widening slightly at her tactical gear and the focused intensity of her expression. No longer the farmer he'd encountered before, but a warrior he recognized all too well. You were there, Olivia said, her weapon unwavering. In Fallujah, when they killed my husband. Rain drummed against the shed roof, filling the silence between them. Lightning flashed, illuminating Roy's face, the face of a man carrying burdens too heavy to set down. Yes, he admitted finally. I was there, private security contractor for King's operation. Your husband had discovered the weapons diversions, traced them back to the Phoenix Gate network. Roy's expression darkened with the memory. He didn't know how high it went. Thought he was dealing with a rogue quartermaster, maybe a corrupt contractor. Not an entire black operation with tentacles in the Pentagon. What happened? The question Olivia had carried for 13 years, now directed at the one man who might finally answer it. Roy met her gaze, something like resignation in his eyes. Ambush, made to look like insurgent activity. King's direct order carried out by his lead operative man called Santiago. I was just perimeter security, but he shook his head. I knew what was happening, didn't stop it. You could have reported it, testified. Olivia's finger tensed on the trigger, 13 years of grief and rage coalescing into this single moment of retribution. Report to who? Roy's laugh was bitter. King had protection, senators, generals, agency, directors. Anyone who might have investigated was either on his payroll or too afraid to move against him. He gestured toward her weapon. You want justice? Take the shot. I've had it coming for years. Before Olivia could respond, her tactical radio crackled urgently. Captain King is mobilizing, attempting to reach the primary Phoenix Gate entrance with remaining security team. They're carrying demolition packs. Lucas's voice was tense with urgency. He's going to destroy the evidence. Roy's expression changed at this information. If he triggers those charges, the entire underground network collapses. Anyone inside or above will be killed in the cave-in or explosion. Olivia made her decision in an instant. My people in the North Field helped them, get them clear of the facility. She backed toward the door, weapon still trained on Roy. Don't make me regret this. What about King? He's mine. The words carried the weight of 13 years of pursuit of grief, transformed into purpose. As Olivia turned to leave, Roy called after her, Captain, he won't surrender, and he never fights fair. She paused momentarily. Neither do I. Outside, the tactical situation had evolved rapidly. King's security team had regrouped using coordinated covering fire to advance toward the main house where the primary Phoenix Gate entrance was located in the root cellar. Doc's veterans had them pinned with selective fire, not attempting to kill, but containing them in an ever-shrinking perimeter. Olivia activated her radio. "All teams execute Phase 2. Sheriff Colby, bring in your units. Lucas converge on the main house. King is the primary target." Across the property, tactical lights flashed on, illuminating the farm from multiple angles. Sheriff Colby's voice echoed from bullhorns positioned at the property entrance. "This is the County Sheriff's Department. The property is surrounded. Lay down your weapons and surrender." King's men hesitated, caught in a tactical disadvantage they hadn't anticipated, uncertain whether to continue their mission or retreat. In that moment of confusion, Olivia moved, using the rain and darkness to approach the farmhouse from the blind side where the kitchen garden provided cover. Through the window she could see King in the kitchen directing his remaining security detail as they prepared to access the root cellar. Demolition charges were being distributed, enough explosive power to collapse the Phoenix Gate facility and destroy all evidence of its illegal use. Olivia had seconds to act. The FBI tactical team was still minutes away. Sheriff Colby's deputies were securing the perimeter but hadn't breached the inner defenses. Lucas was approaching from the opposite direction but wouldn't arrive in time. Decision made, she activated a remote trigger in her pocket. Throughout the house, the defensive measures she'd installed weeks earlier activated simultaneously, steel shutters slamming down over windows, reinforced bolts engaging on external doors, emergency lighting switching to battery power. The farmhouse transformed instantly from vulnerable target to hardened fortress with King trapped inside. Through her earpiece, she heard King's startled shout as the security protocols engaged, isolating him from his men outside. Perfect. Olivia accessed the house through the one entrance not sealed by the security system, a concealed panel beneath the back porch that connected to the root cellar. As she moved through the narrow passage, she could hear King above barking orders into his phone, demanding extraction, threatening consequences. The voice of a man accustomed to power now discovering its limitations. She emerged silently into the root cellar, a cavernous space beneath the old farmhouse that had been expanded and reinforced during the Cold War to serve as the primary entrance to the Phoenix Gate facility. The original farm storage preserves potatoes, home-canned vegetables, remained as camouflage along one wall, while the opposite side contained the reinforced blast door leading to the underground complex. King stood with his back to her, supervising, as two security operatives prepared demolition charges around the blast door. He wore an expensive suit, incongruous in the rustic setting, and held a satellite phone to his ear. "I don't care what resources it requires," he was saying, voice tight with controlled fury. "Get me extraction now. The entire operation is compromised." Olivia raised her weapon. "I wouldn't count on extraction, King." The mercenaries whirled toward her, reaching for weapons, but froze as red laser sights appeared on their chests. Lucas and two FBI agents had entered through another access point, weapons trained and ready. "Stand down," Lucas ordered, his FBI credentials visible. "Federal agents, you're under arrest." The mercenaries exchanged glances, calculating odds, then slowly raised their hands in surrender. King, however, maintained his composure, lowering the satellite phone as he turned to face Olivia. For the first time, she stood face to face with the man who had ordered her husband's death. In person, Marshal King was less impressive than his reputation suggested, mid-50s, silver-haired, with the manicured appearance of a corporate executive rather than a criminal mastermind. Only his eyes revealed the predator beneath the polished exterior, cold, calculating, utterly without remorse. "Captain Turner," he said, recognition flashing across his features. "I wondered if you'd ever find me. 13 years is quite the dedicated pursuit." "Marshal King," Olivia replied, her weapon unwavering. You're under arrest for arms trafficking, conspiracy, treason against the United States, and the murder of Captain Robert Mackenzie. A thin smile crossed King's face. Bold accusations. Difficult to prove, especially since all evidence is about to be eliminated. His hand moved toward his pocket, where a remote detonator was visible. Insurance policy. One press, and this entire facility collapses, taking any evidence with it. Drop it, Lucas ordered, advancing with his weapon trained on King. FBI, put the detonator down now. King's smile remained the confidence of a man who had evaded consequences his entire career. You know what happens to federal agents who interfere with classified operations, Agent Reed? They disappear. Their families suffer unfortunate accidents. Their reputations are destroyed by evidence they can't refute. Last warning, Lucas growled. Drop the detonator. King's thumb hovered over the trigger. I have protection at the highest levels. This ends today, but not with my arrest. The most you'll accomplish is dying beneath tons of rubble when a single shot rang out, echoing through the root cellar. King's expression transformed from smug confidence to shocked disbelief as he looked down at his chest, where a crimson stain spread across his expensive suit. The detonator fell from suddenly nerveless fingers clattering to the concrete floor. Behind King stood Roy Miller, his pistol still raised, expression grim but determined. That's for Mac, Roy said quietly, and all the others you sacrificed. King collapsed to his knees, eyes wide with incomprehension that his machinations, his connections, his power had failed to protect him. You can't, he gasped, reaching toward his fallen detonator. Olivia kicked it away, standing over the man who had destroyed her life 13 years earlier. It's over, King. The Phoenix Gate network, the weapons trafficking, all of it. We have everything, documentation, financial records, operational details. King's eyes locked onto hers, hatred mingling with grudging recognition. Should have killed you, too, he managed, blood bubbling at his lips. Mistake? Yes, Olivia agreed coldly. It was. As federal agents swarmed the farmhouse securing the scene, and the wounded King, Olivia turned to Roy, who had surrendered his weapon to Lucas without resistance. Why? She asked simply. Roy met her gaze, something like peace in his expression for the first time. Fallujah's haunted me for 13 years. Your husband was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened to him. He glanced at the federal agents securing King's men. Neither did any of the others who got in King's way. Lucas approached, holstering his weapon. Roy Miller, you're under arrest for conspiracy, weapons trafficking, and participation in illegal operations. His voice was professional, but not unsympathetic. However, your cooperation will be noted in my report, as will your actions here tonight. As federal agents led Roy away, he paused beside Olivia. In my vest pocket, he said quietly, your husband's final message. King kept it as leverage against those who might betray him. With trembling fingers, Olivia retrieved a small data drive from Roy's pocket, the last piece of her husband she would ever receive. Their eyes met in a moment of silent understanding, before Roy was escorted from the root cellar. Outside, the rain had stopped. Dawn approached, gray light seeping into the eastern sky, as FBI tactical teams secured the property and medical personnel treated the wounded. Sheriff Colby coordinated with federal authorities, his weathered face showing satisfaction at justice finally being served in his jurisdiction. Doc Thompson stood with his network of veterans, these men of different generations united by common purpose and shared values. They had answered his call without question, standing ready to risk their lives to help a fellow soldier's widow find justice. Olivia watched as Marshal King was loaded into an ambulance, federal agents accompanying him to ensure he faced the consequences that had eluded him for decades. The evidence recovered from the Phoenix Gate facility would dismantle his entire network, the weapons operations, the political protection, the financial empire built on betrayal and blood. Captain Lucas approached his professional demeanor softening. The bureau director wants to personally thank you. Your evidence and testimony will be crucial in the prosecutions to come. Olivia nodded, emotions held in careful check. What about Roy and the others? Roy's looking at significant time, but his cooperation and actions tonight will be considered. As for the Iron Vipers, the ones who weren't directly involved in King's operations will likely make deals. Lucas hesitated. For what it's worth, I think Roy's been looking for redemption for a long time. Tonight, he found it. The eastern sky brightened, further golden light spilling across Riverbend Farm, illuminating not just a property, but the conclusion of a 13-year quest for truth and justice. What will you do now? Lucas asked quietly. Olivia looked out over the orchard, her orchard the dream she and Mac had shared so long ago. Exactly what we planned. Restore this place. Make it produce again. She touched her husband's dog tags, still hanging around her neck. Finish what we started. 3 months later, autumn painted the Blue Ridge Mountains in hues of gold and crimson, the ancient slopes aglow with seasonal transformation. At Riverbend Farm, the apple orchard had been restored to productive order. Diseased trees removed healthy ones, pruned new saplings planted to replace the losses. The harvest was modest, but promising a first step toward renewed vitality. Olivia stood on the farmhouse porch, a mug of coffee warming her hands against the October chill. She wore civilian clothes, now jeans, flannel shirt, work boots, the tactical gear, and weapons stored away, hopefully never to be needed again. The trials were proceeding in federal court. King had survived his injury and now faced multiple life sentences. His network had been dismantled, his political protectors exposed, his operation destroyed. Justice so long delayed was finally being served. Doc Thompson's truck rumbled up the driveway, the old medic arriving for their regular Sunday breakfast, a tradition that had emerged in the aftermath of that rainy night. He carried a bag of fresh pastries from the local bakery, along with the newspaper tucked under his arm. "Morning," he called, mounting the porch steps, with the stiffness of age but the determination of a man who refused to surrender to it. "Brought those apple turnovers you like." "Coffee's fresh," Olivia replied with a genuine smile, holding the door for him. In the kitchen they settled into comfortable routine, Olivia pouring coffee, Doc arranging pastries on plates, the easy silence of friendship that required no constant conversation to validate itself. "Sheriff Colby mentioned the FBI finished clearing out the Phoenix Gate facility," Doc noted, adding cream to his coffee. "Sealed it permanently this time." Olivia nodded. "Lucas called yesterday. Said they recovered weapons caches from 6 similar facilities across the country. King's operation was bigger than anyone realized." "What about Roy?" "Testified against King last week. His cooperation has been substantial and unprecedented, according to the prosecutor." Olivia sipped her coffee. "He'll still serve time, but possibly as little as 5 years with good behavior." Doc studied her over his mug. "You at peace with that, after what he was part of?" The question hung in the autumn cool kitchen. Olivia considered it honestly before responding. Roy didn't kill Mac. He was there. He was complicit, but he didn't pull the trigger. She looked out the window toward the orchard, where golden light filtered through red-leaved trees. And in the end, he chose differently, chose to help end it, even knowing what it would cost him. "Redemption's a powerful thing," Doc agreed quietly. "So is justice," Olivia replied. Mac would have wanted both. They ate in companionable silence, the newspaper between them carrying headlines about the ongoing trials and the far-reaching implications of King's criminal empire. The story had captured national attention, a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of government and military, exposed by the relentless pursuit of one woman seeking truth about her husband's death. After breakfast, they walked the orchard together, Doc offering advice based on generations of local knowledge, Olivia planning improvements for the coming spring. The farm was becoming what she and Mac had envisioned so long ago, their shared dream finally taking physical form. As they reached the north field, now cleared and prepared for spring planting, Doc paused, looking back toward the farmhouse with thoughtful eyes. "You know, when you first arrived, I wondered if you'd spot it once you found what you were looking for," he admitted. "Thought maybe this place was just a means to an end for you." Livia considered this, her gaze traveling across the property that had become more than just a tactical position in her quest for justice. It had become home. "It started that way," she acknowledged. "But somewhere along the line it changed. This land, this community." She gestured toward the mountains rising beyond the farm boundaries. "Mac would have loved it here. Every day I find another reason why this was the right choice for us." "Us," Doc noted with gentle perception. "You still think of decisions that way?" "Some bonds don't end," Olivia said simply. "Not even with death." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the restored orchard as they continued their inspection. At the property's edge, a modest stone had been placed beneath an ancient apple tree, not an official grave marker, but a memorial nonetheless. Robert Mac Mackenzie's name was carved into the granite, along with his rank service dates, and the simple inscription, "Until Valhalla." Doc respectfully remained at a distance, while Olivia approached the stone, her fingers tracing the engraved letters with familiar tenderness. "It's done, Mac," she said softly. "King's operation is finished. The truth is out." Her voice caught slightly. "I kept my promise." The autumn breeze stirred the branches above, sending a cascade of crimson leaves spiraling around her, nature's own tribute to sacrifice and endurance, to endings and new beginnings. As Olivia rejoined Doc for the walk back to the farmhouse, a distinctive sound broke the pastoral quiet, the rumble of motorcycle engines approaching the farm entrance. For a moment, tension returned to her posture, combat reflexes never entirely forgotten. But it wasn't the Iron Vipers. Instead, a group of older men on Harley-Davidsons and Indians turned onto the property veterans from Doc's network who had answered the call that rainy night months earlier. "Almost forgot," Doc said with a slight smile. "Told the boys we'd be harvesting the South Orchard today. They offered to help." The riders parked their motorcycles in a neat line beside the barn, men in their 60s and 70s, some wearing Vietnam-era unit patches, others displaying Desert Storm or Iraq campaign ribbons. Different wars, different generations united by the unspoken brotherhood of those who had served. One rider dismounted with particular care, his movements revealing the aftermath of old combat injuries. William Wild Bill Hargrove, former Special Forces colonel, now in his 70s, but still carrying himself with military bearing. He had been among the first to respond to Doc's call for help, bringing with him not just tactical expertise, but crucial evidence about King's operation from his contacts in military intelligence. "Captain Turner," he greeted Olivia, formally extending a weathered hand. "Or do you prefer Mackenzie these days?" "Just Olivia is fine, Colonel," she replied, accepting the handshake. Wild Bill nodded, glancing around the property with professional assessment. "Place is looking good. Sam would be proud." At Olivia's questioning look, he clarified, "Your father-in-law, Served with him briefly before I transferred to Special Forces. Hell of a soldier. So I've heard, Olivia said softly. I never got to meet him. Same spirit, though, Wild Bill observed, studying her with knowing eyes. Same determination. Mac got that from his old man. And you've got it, too. The veterans organized themselves with the efficient precision of men long accustomed to working as a unit distributing harvesting equipment and breaking into teams to tackle the South Orchard. Despite their age, they moved with purpose and energy, finding renewal in meaningful work and shared camaraderie. As they worked through the afternoon, stories flowed between them. Experiences from different wars and eras, humorous anecdotes about military life, quiet acknowledgments of comrades lost. Olivia found herself welcomed into this fraternity of veterans, not as an outsider, but as one of their own, a fellow warrior who understood the weight of service and sacrifice. By sunset, the South Orchard had been harvested, the apples sorted and crated for transport to market. The veterans gathered around outdoor tables Olivia had set up near the barn, sharing a meal of barbecue and beer, a celebration of work completed and bonds strengthened. As twilight deepened toward night, Lucas Reed's government-issue SUV turned into the farm entrance. Now officially assigned as FBI liaison for the ongoing King prosecution, he visited periodically to update Olivia on case developments and collect additional testimony as needed. He joined the gathering, accepted a beer from Doc, and found a seat beside Olivia at one of the picnic tables. Good turnout, he observed, nodding toward the assembled veterans. Doc's network, Olivia explained. They helped with the harvest today. Lucas studied the group thoughtfully. More than just a labor force. Family, Olivia corrected softly. Of a sort. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as Wild Bill regaled younger veterans with stories from his Special Forces days, gesturing expansively, his audience captivated by tales from an era that had shaped American military history. Heard from Washington this morning, Lucas said after a while, his voice low enough that only Olivia could hear. King's political protection is crumbling. 3 senators, a deputy secretary of defense, 2 general officers, all facing indictments. The evidence from the Phoenix Gate facilities was irrefutable. Good, Olivia said simply. No one should be above justice. Lucas nodded agreement, then hesitated before continuing. There's something else. Roy Miller sent this for you. He withdrew an envelope from his jacket. It's been cleared by the prosecution team, no security concerns. Olivia accepted the envelope, recognizing Roy's handwriting on the front. She opened it carefully, finding a single sheet of paper inside a letter written in the block printing typical of military personnel. Captain Mackenzie, by the time you read this, I'll have finished my testimony against King. The prosecutor says I've earned consideration for sentencing. Doesn't matter much to me anymore. Some debts can't be repaid with reduced prison time. What I did and what I failed to do in Fallujah can't be undone. Your husband was a good man who stood against corruption when others looked away. I chose wrong. He chose right. That's the difference between us. There's something you should know. Before the ambush, Mac entrusted a message for you to a local interpreter. King's men intercepted it, but I made a copy. It's enclosed with this letter. Some words a man should have the right to speak even after death. I can't ask for forgiveness. Wouldn't be right. But I wanted you to know that finishing what Mac started was the first right thing I've done in a long time. Beneath Roy's letter was a smaller piece of paper, a transcription of the message Mac had attempted to send her in those final days before his death. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it, revealing her husband's distinctive handwriting. Liv, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong. The weapons diversions connect to something called Phoenix Gate Old Cold War facilities being reactivated for private operations. King is the coordinator. This goes higher than I initially thought. I'm compiling evidence, but it's risky. If something happens to me, look for property purchases near these coordinates. They correspond to Phoenix Gate locations. The pattern will lead you to King. Remember our dream farm, the orchard we talked about. There's one near a Phoenix Gate location in Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains. Perfect place to retire someday. Or to continue this fight, if I can't. Whatever happens, know that loving you has been the greatest honor of my life. More than the uniform, more than the mission. You are my heart. Live. Until Valhalla. Olivia stared at the paper emotions surging beneath her carefully maintained composure. After 13 years, her husband's final words had found their way to her, confirming what she had suspected, what had driven her pursuit of King, what had ultimately led her to Riverbend Farm. Mac had laid the groundwork for her investigation, pointing her toward the Phoenix Gate network, even from beyond death. His final act had been to give her the path to truth and justice, and to the home they had dreamed of sharing. Lucas remained respectfully silent, understanding the significance of the moment. Around them, the gathering of veterans, continued men who had served in different wars across different decades, now united in the simple pleasure of community and purpose. Finally, Olivia folded the letter, carefully tucking it into her pocket next to her heart. "You okay?" Lucas asked quietly. "Yes," she answered, and for the first time in 13 years, it was entirely true. "I am." As the evening deepened into night, Doc started a bonfire in the stone pit near the barn, a gathering point that drew the veterans into a circle of light and warmth against the autumn chill. Someone produced a guitar, and soon familiar songs filled the air, ballads from Vietnam Desert Storm anthems, timeless military cadences that transcended specific conflicts. Olivia sat slightly apart, watching as these men, who had seen the worst of humanity, found moments of peace and brotherhood in simple rituals of community. Doc caught her eye across the fire, raising his beer bottle in a silent toast that acknowledged everything she had accomplished and everything she had endured to reach this moment. She returned the gesture, feeling the weight of Mac's final letter in her pocket, the closure of one chapter and the confirmation of another. Riverbend Farm had begun as a tactical position in her quest for justice. Now it would continue as what she and Mac had always intended it to be, a home, a sanctuary, a place of new beginnings. The next morning dawned clear and cold frost, silvering the harvested orchard in crystalline beauty. Olivia rose early, as always, making coffee, before stepping onto the porch to greet the day. The veterans had departed the previous night, returning to their lives with promises to return for future harvests and projects. She sipped her coffee, watching the sun crest the Blue Ridge Mountains, illuminating the valley with golden light. After so many years of pursuing shadows, of living in the dark spaces of grief and determination, the simple pleasure of morning sunlight felt like a gift she was only now learning to accept. The sound of an approaching vehicle drew her attention to the driveway where Sheriff Colby's patrol car appeared, moving at a leisurely pace toward the farmhouse. He parked and emerged carrying a folder under his arm. "Morning, Sheriff," Olivia greeted him. "Coffee's fresh if you're interested." "Wouldn't say no," Colby replied, mounting the porch steps with a nod of greeting. "Got something you might want to see." In the kitchen, Colby accepted the offered mug with appreciation before placing the folder on the table between them. "Final report on the Phoenix Gate facility beneath your property. FBI cleared me to share it with you given your involvement." Olivia opened the folder, finding detailed documentation of the now-sealed underground complex, its Cold War origins, its illicit reactivation by King's organization, its final decommissioning under federal supervision. They poured concrete into the main access shafts, Colby explained. Place is permanently sealed now. No one will be using it for weapons trafficking or anything else. Good, Olivia said, turning pages to examine the facility blueprints. What about the other sites? Same protocol at all Phoenix Gate locations. FBI's been thorough. Colby sipped his coffee. King's operation is finished, completely. Olivia closed the folder, a sense of completion settling over her. The mission that had consumed 13 years of her life. The pursuit of truth about her husband's death. The dismantling of the operation that had killed him was truly over. "What's next for you?" Colby asked, studying her with perceptive eyes. "After all this time focused on King, on getting justice, what comes after?" It was a question Olivia had been asking herself in recent weeks. The driving purpose that had sustained her through grief and loss had been fulfilled. What remained was the rest of her life. A future she had scarcely allowed herself to imagine during those years of single-minded pursuit. She glanced out the window toward the orchard where new saplings stood alongside older trees, a symbol of regeneration and continuity of endings that contained within them the seeds of new beginnings. "This," she said simply, "the farm, the life Mac and I planned." A smile touched her lips, small but genuine. "And maybe something more. Doc's talking about starting a formal support program for veterans in the area. Asked if I'd help coordinate." Colby nodded approval. "You'd be good at that. God knows we need it around here." After Colby departed, Olivia walked the property alone, moving through the orchard, where fallen leaves crunched beneath her boots, their autumn colors a vibrant carpet across the ground. She reached the memorial stone beneath the ancient apple tree, kneeling to place a hand against the cool granite where Mac's name was engraved. "I'm home, Mac," she said softly. "Just like we planned." The autumn breeze stirred the branches above, sending a shower of crimson and gold leaves spiraling around her nature's affirmation. Perhaps, or simply, the beauty of a season that understood both ending and renewal were necessary parts of the same eternal cycle. Olivia rose, brushing leaves from her jeans, and turned toward the farmhouse, toward the future that awaited beyond the long quest now completed. For 13 years, she had carried the weight of unresolved loss of justice, denied of truth concealed. Now she carried something different, the peace of promises kept, of missions completed, of love that had transcended even death to guide her home. Riverbend Farm stretched before her, bathed in autumn sunlight, not just a property, but the embodiment of a dream shared and finally realized. Here in this place, Captain Olivia Turner had completed her final mission. Here Olivia Mackenzie would begin the rest of her life. And somewhere she knew Mac was smiling.